SimCity 4 is a game that is based on the American system of city government. You build up your city from nothing, and by managing things like planning, taxes, and utilities, you guide it to success. But I always wanted to play a version of SimCity that was set in the UK. The game does come with a London region, but it takes a few liberties. For example, apparently there is a bunch of farmland in the middle of central London. But I don't just want the game to tell me I'm in the UK, I want it to function like it would if it was in the UK, with our system of city government. So what kind of game would that be? Well, first of all, who would you even be playing as? I'm going to skim over the question of what even counts as a city in the UK, because I don't think it's relevant in this case. Clearly, if you were making a UK city building game, you would expect to be building something like Greater London or Greater Manchester. So let's just pretend for this video that those are cities, okay? You don't need to comment about that. But in SimCity, it's very clear that you are playing as the mayor of your city. And that is how it usually works in the US. Like, New York City has a mayor, Los Angeles has a mayor. In the UK, it's a bit more complicated than that. Some places have mayors, other places don't. Some places have multiple mayors at different levels of government. But I think we can probably say that you can still play as a mayor. The real question is, what are you going to be the mayor of? Because in the US, cities generally only have one layer of local government. In New York, there is a city council and a city mayor, and below them there are 5 boroughs, each with their own borough president, but they have virtually no actual power in the administration of the city. So clearly, if you're making a game out of that, you're going to want players to be playing as the city government. But in the UK, it's not necessarily such an easy choice. Like in London, for example, there are independent councils for each of the city's 32 boroughs. They're responsible for things like planning, road maintenance, and waste disposal. And then above them, there is a strategic authority called the Greater London Authority, which handles citywide things like transport and some of the emergency services. We'll get to that. Meanwhile, in other English cities, there is a different model. In Greater Manchester, there are 10 independent boroughs. But unlike in London, where the Strategic Authority is elected and operates completely independently, in this case, the Strategic Authority is made up of the individual councils. So they all have to come together and agree with the Mayor of Greater Manchester in order for citywide projects to get done. So which of these should you be playing as? Now, we could get around this by deciding to set the game in Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland, where cities do only have a single layer of local government. But there are some downsides to that, which we'll get to later. And by the way, Northern Ireland's system is so different that at times I'm going to have to kind of skim over it because it would almost need a whole video of its own. But okay, one way or another, the game puts us in control of a city. What do we actually do? Well, one of the first things you'll do in SimCity is start laying down zones. There are 3 to choose from: residential, commercial, and industrial. Once you lay down a zone, you can just sit back and buildings of that type will start to appear as if by magic. You don't have to actually build most of the buildings in your city. When I was playing SimCity growing up, I assumed that this was something they made up for the game because it just seemed like such a video game way of planning out a city. And it was only years later that I learned that this is actually how it works in the United States. To British people, this might seem like a strange way of doing things, but it turns out that almost every country does it like this, and we are actually the outliers for not doing it this way. Zoning in SimCity is characteristically American though, because it only allows for single-use zoning. Every building is either residential or commercial or industrial. This system is blamed for those massive urban sprawls you see in America, where it's just nothing but houses as far as the eye can see. In real life, a lot of countries make greater use of mixed-use zoning, where you say that this area is predominantly residential, but there's still room for the odd shop or cafe or office. In the UK though, we don't do zoning at all. Instead, councils have to prepare local plans which set out which areas are suitable for which types of development. At first that might sound very similar to zoning, but the big difference is that zoning leads to something called by right development. If a piece of land is zoned as high-density residential, for example, and a developer wants to build there, they can. They'll still have to go through a bit of a process to show that they're following all of the rules and regulations, but assuming they are, they will be able to build some apartments there. In the UK, it doesn't quite work that way. If you mark out an area of land for residential development, you will still have to go through and manually review every individual planning application that a developer submits. And some things fall under permitted development, which means they can skip most of this process. But in general, you will have to spend a lot of your time reviewing planning applications and it will slow down the game quite a bit. But of course, zoning is not the only thing you'll be doing in SimCity. You're also responsible for utilities, making sure everyone has enough water and power. This kind of stuff is not always handled at the city level in the US, but it can be. Like Los Angeles, for example, has a city department of water and power, which supplies 8.1 gigawatts of electricity and 1.6 billion litres of water every day. In the UK, this is never the case. Depending on which part of the UK you're in, power and water are handled by some combination of the government and private companies. So in our version of the game, these utilities will be removed from your control. But that does leave the third utility, waste disposal. This is controlled at the council level, and bin collections are famously one of the things that people most associate with their local council. So instead of being buried in a submenu, this would probably become one of the main mechanics of the game. And then we come to the emergency services, police, fire, and healthcare. And this is one place where SimCity actually isn't like the real-life USA, because in America, healthcare is privatized, and as far as I can tell, city governments don't have that much to do with it, and they certainly aren't building clinics and hospitals and running it all for themselves. This is also true in the UK, but for a different reason. We have a national health service. So even though it was already inaccurate in the original game, I think if we're making a proper British version of SimCity, healthcare is going to have to go. Police and fire, as far as I can tell, are generally handled at the city level in the US. In the UK, it's more of a mixed bag. Scotland and Northern Ireland both have a single national police force and a single national fire service. But in England and Wales, police forces do receive a portion of their funding from local councils, and those local councils can have an oversight role. So I'm going to say that police and fire can stay in the game. We will have to get rid of jails though. Some American cities do have their own prisons, like New York has Rikers Island, but in the UK that's absolutely not a thing. Education. Now this is a complicated one. In Northern Ireland, schools are run directly by the Department for Education, but in Scotland and Wales, councils have full responsibility for running schools, and they do spend quite a bit of their budget on it. In England, it's somewhere in the middle. Many schools are run by councils, but many others are academies, which means they receive funding directly from central government and bypass local councils completely. Given the differences on this, I'm going to say that schools can stay in the game, but I think we are going to have to get rid of universities. So, we've removed quite a few features from the game, but we have added a feature where you have to click through hundreds of planning applications. But one thing we haven't talked about yet is money. In SimCity, the main way that you control your income is by raising and lowering taxes. It's not exactly clear what these taxes are. It seems to be some kind of income tax, but it's based on the type of property rather than the level of income, and it also applies to businesses. But you can raise each of these taxes up to a maximum of 20%, or you can lower them down to 0 if you want to. This is roughly how it works in the US, it's just that in real life there are multiple different taxes instead of just one. New York City, for example, gets almost half of its income from a property tax, and then there's an income tax, and a sales tax, and a corporation tax, and so on. And if you look at the total amount of tax that is paid across the US every year, about 65% of it goes to the federal government, 20% to the states, and 15% goes to local governments like cities. In the UK though, the central government collects about 95% of all tax revenue. This means that our cities have much less power to raise money for themselves to pay for things they want to do. They do raise some of their own money though, and the main way that councils in Great Britain do that is through council tax, a tax that is paid by every household based on the value of their home. But councils in England are only allowed to raise council tax by 5% each year in cash terms. If they want to raise it by more than that, they have to hold a referendum, asking voters, would you like to pay more tax? It's only been attempted once, and it was overwhelmingly defeated, so effectively 5% is the limit. It's kind of hard to translate this into the game because council tax is set in cash terms, meaning you have to raise it every year just to keep up with inflation. Meanwhile, in SimCity, inflation doesn't exist and taxes are set as percentages. The cap only exists in England, so again, we could get around this by just setting the game in Scotland or Wales. And Northern Ireland uses a whole different system that I'm just not going to get into. But in any case, council tax, the only major tax that you have any real control over, is going to make up less than a third of your income. Another big source is going to be business rates, a tax on businesses. But the rates are set by the government, and most councils don't get to keep all of the money. In Scotland and Wales, the income from business rates is sent entirely to the Scottish and Welsh governments, where it gets pooled and redistributed back out to councils on the basis of which of them need the most money. This is a case where setting the game in England would actually give us the most control, because the standard situation in England is that councils get to retain 50% of the business rates income, with the rest of it being pooled and redistributed. Some places like Greater Manchester and the West Midlands are currently being allowed to retain 100% of their business rates income, and this could be expanded in the future, but currently it's not clear. And to be fair, that could massively disadvantage some parts of the country. The rest of your funding is going to come mostly in the form of grants from central government. So the upshot of all of this is that, unlike in the original SimCity, in our version of the game, your income is going to be largely outside of your control. But the good news is that for most of the money you do get, you're not going to have to think too hard about how to spend it. Some of the money that you get will be ring-fenced for a specific purpose. For example, in England, most of the education funding you get will come in the form of the Dedicated Schools Grant, which legally must be used for education. So that's easy. And as for the money that isn't ring-fenced, you will have to spend most of it on your statutory duties. Councils in the UK have hundreds of things that they have to do under the law. And one of those things is something that doesn't even exist in SimCity: social care. Although the UK has a national health service, we do not have a national care service, and that job has to be picked up by local councils, providing things like care homes, supported living and foster programs. Not every council has a social care duty because there are different layers of local government, but among those that do, social care eats up about 78% of their budget. It's gone. With whatever money you have left after all of that, you might be able to do some of your own projects, as long as the government doesn't change anything. This is why people say that the UK is a very centralised country, where a lot of the big decisions get made in London, or in Edinburgh, Cardiff and Belfast. And as it happens, I'm actually working on another video now, but I just got the chance to speak to someone who seemed like he might know some things about this. So I thought, I was generally just having a casual chat with him, but while I had him, I might as well ask him about this too.
Well, I mean, firstly, thank you for raising this, because I'm a big advocate of devolution, because I think that people who live and work in their community make better decisions about what's best for their community than people sitting in Whitehall or Westminster, frankly. And that is why we've given more powers to particularly our mayors, and more money and resource. Now, comparatively, that may be less or more than other European countries, but that's what we've done. We've also created what we call Pride in Place, which is a fund where we allocate money to a particular place. But having allocated the money, we then allow the local community to decide what the money is spent on. So it's very much a locally led issue. And I'm up for doing more on devolution. I do think it's very important that how money is spent is determined by local people.
Anyway, where am I?